It's the watch party. It's a Monday. I'm discombobulated because it's Monday. But you know what? I'm happier on a Monday because it's the best damn day of the week. I'm finishing one thing that I should have done right before I started this live. But you know what I was doing instead? I was over here chatting, talking trash to people, specifically about football, because I'm feeling good about, hold on, that's still working. My Rams, Lions, and New England Patriots fans out there. I feel you. I understand. But I get to have a little bit of brag sessions every once in a while, don't I, too? Glad you guys are here. Understand, again, this is the best damn day of the week. Even the folks who don't like it, I get it, because it's tiring. There's a lot to do. I have to jam all this stuff that I want to talk about into an hour and not even go over because I got TDR right after this. So I appreciate everyone that always hangs around and goes through the full gauntlet of all of our shows, from me doing this stream, then on to John's stuff, then me back to doing other stuff I have to do to put things up back up on this same channel. So you guys should come back around, catch all the stories that we do later. We repost it after it all's said and done. Hey, what's up, Ma? Hey, there she is. She just said hey to me in the chat. Hi, Ma. Understand. I understand. You know, my mother, she's a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Come on, bro. Come on. I understand. They're really good. Pat Mahomes is good. I feel like she's more of a Pat Mahomes fan than she is a Kansas City Chiefs fan. So therefore it kind of transfers over, you know. It's just how it works that way. Anyways, enough of the football talk. There's a lot going on. I honestly even thought maybe I could start early because there's lots happening and I have to jam it in this 1 hour. But you know what? Let's relax. It's the week of Thanksgiving. The world is beginning to be set further on fire than it was before. We're supposed to be thinking about Thanksgiving dinner, getting around family, wondering if you're going to make it on that flight, wondering if you're going to make it out of the airport, wondering if your luggage is going to get lost. I don't know how bad the situation still is in airports because I've had absolutely zero plans of going anywhere, bro. None of this is appealing to me. Not looking for that to happen any other times soon later. But everyone that is going, safe travels. Be careful. Be safe. Watch your back. You never know when ice is around the corner. Which, by the way, we're not even talking about them today. Too many other big news things happening over the weekend. Every time something happens over the weekend, I wonder, have people already looked into this enough and talked about it and siphoned all through it all? And by Monday, if we're going off of something that happened on Saturday, is it really worthwhile? Damn it, yes, it is. Today, it absolutely is. I want you guys to understand what is that happened, what I think about it, what is I'm trying to figure out, still analyze where this came from, how it started, where it's going, and how, most importantly, where it's going to finish. I want to start with what it is that's Republican senators, led by Senator Mike Rounds, are talking about regarding Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and this deal. Again, we're back on Russian-Ukraine deals. I just mentioned last week that we haven't heard much about it because it seems like it's totally abandoned because Vladimir Putin kicked his ass around in this summit, and we never really heard what it was said and why. But we're beginning to find out who's running this show. It all starts with this very confusing situation that Mike Rounds was talking about. Let's go here.
We're doing this on a bipartisan basis. We were there when Secretary Rubio made the phone call, and the number one, I did ask, can we say that we've received the phone call from you? And he says yes. And can we explain basically what had occurred? And he said yes. And so what we can share with you is the federal government, or this administration was not responsible for the release of this information in its current form. But we can also tell you that at this point, they want to be able to utilize it as a starting point for where Russia is making demands. And we're doing this on a bipartisan.
Mike Rounds there talking about Russia making demands with this point plan, things that they want to get to end the conflict that, of course, Vladimir Putin and the Russians started. I mean, that's the starting point that many folks in this MAGA administration refuse to acknowledge, and that's probably one of the reasons why we have such a confusing situation. Let's see if ABC News can clear up to us what's confusing, what's been happening, why Mike Rounds is trying to discuss in this roundabout way this whole plan that is a Russian demand list. Here's what's been going on.
Good morning, Janae. That's right. And this could be a very pivotal moment for Ukraine, with the Trump administration ramping up pressure on the war-torn country to accept its latest peace plan. And they're giving Kyiv a stark ultimatum: take the New Deal by Thanksgiving or risk losing U.S. support. This morning, high-stakes meetings between U.S. and Ukrainian officials set to begin in Switzerland. As Russia continues its relentless, deadly attacks, a Ukrainian official tells ABC News the Trump administration is threatening to cut off all military aid if the war-torn country does not agree to the administration's proposed peace deal. But President Trump now says his 28-point peace plan is not his final offer.
We're trying to get it ended. One way or the other, we have to get it ended.
Then overnight, a group of senators say Secretary of State Marco Rubio told them that the plan is a Russian proposal, directly contradicting what the president has claimed.
It is not our recommendation. It is not our peace plan. It is a proposal that was received and as an intermediary.
But soon after, Rubio publicly denying the comments, saying the peace proposal was authored by the U.S. It is offered as a strong framework for ongoing negotiations. It is based on input from the Russian side, but it is also based on previous and ongoing input from Ukraine. But that plan, alarming our allies across Europe. It forces Kyiv to give up more territory in the east, giving Russia control of almost 1/5 of the entire country. The deal would also limit the size of Ukraine's military to 600,000 and force Ukraine to promise it will never join NATO. But the plan does provide some sort of U.S. military-backed security guarantee for the country. President Zelensky says Ukraine may be choosing between losing its dignity or losing a key partner. Even Republican Senator Mitch McConnell is criticizing the deal, saying, quote, Putin has spent the entire year trying to play President Trump for a fool. Rewarding Russian butchery would be disastrous to America's interests. Now we're also...
First of all, let's address the obvious. Mitch McConnell didn't say shit. Mitch McConnell didn't say anything about this 28-point peace plan. Mitch McConnell's spokesperson said something and wrote up what it is that he should probably say. Mitch McConnell's old ass didn't say anything. Sorry, but it's true. Okay. I mean, in my opinion, I don't know Mitch McConnell. But let's go to the details of what is that went on here. Does anyone really think that Donald Trump came with a 28-point peace plan between Russia and Ukraine? Does anyone really think that, especially since, as we saw, some of those points of those 28 include many things that Vladimir Putin wants? In fact, that demand list that Mike Rounds was talking about, and some of those demands, including the things that Donald Trump talked about on the campaign trail that were troubling to people who were paying attention to him talking about the way to appease someone who's invading countries, to give them what they want and then hope that they'll stop doing what it is that they said they're going to keep doing. And so when that's happening here, as far as these details of limiting the size of the Ukraine army, never joining NATO, and also giving up that territory as he consistently talked about, does anyone really believe that this has anything to do with Donald Trump coming up with some plan out of nowhere when he's been dealing with, let's not forget, all of the corruption and scandals that are surrounding his administration? Let me give Angus King, independent but a Democratic-leaning guy, some more chance to talk about it. At this press conference, when all of these senators were standing in front of folks talking about what is that Marco Rubio's caught himself in the middle of this whole thing, and now he's having some contradictory statements being blasted by these folks.
This has been an extraordinary weekend, both because of the sessions that we've had with people from all over the world, but also because of the communication, as was mentioned today, from Secretary Rubio and the leaked 28-point plan, which, according to Secretary Rubio, is not the administration's position. It is essentially the wish list of the Russians that is now being presented to the Europeans and to the Ukrainians. It does provide a guideline to try to narrow the issues between Ukraine and Russia. And the encouraging thing to me is that the administration is not attempting to negotiate this agreement unilaterally, but indeed is in close consultation in the next few days with Ukraine and with our European allies. So I think that's an important development. All of us read that statement yesterday. We're alarmed by it, I think. That's a fair statement. It turns out that it is a sort of a beginning point for negotiations, and we'll see where the discussions go from here. Everyone wants this war to end, but we want it to end on a fair and just peace.
Demand list from Russia. I mean, it's the same. He said even when we saw it, it was startling to look at all of these details and think, is this the plan? Is this what they want? Is this what they're presenting to us? I mean, it can't possibly be. Again, like I said, they're startled by it because it didn't make much sense, and it gave them the freedom, again, back to Mike Rounds, Republican in this case, to talk about what is that Rubio told them and giving them permission to even talk about it beforehand. Marco Rubio got his signals crossed, and we're trying to figure out where and then why he's not explaining it.
Secretary Rubio did make a phone call to us this afternoon. I think he made it very clear to us that we are the recipients of a proposal that was delivered to one of our representatives. It is not our recommendation. It is not our peace plan. It is a proposal that was received, and as an intermediary, we have made arrangements to share it, and we did not release it. It was leaked. It was not released by our members or our representatives.
So, I mean, I'm pretty much past whether or not it was leaked or not. The whole point, maybe they're concerned about whether or not it was leaked and who it was leaked by, because this is bad, bro. This looks really bad. It makes them have to then scramble, specifically them being Marco Rubio in this situation, scramble and try and tell them what he told them isn't what they're saying. So in order for that to make any sense, Marco Rubio is telling everyone that you can probably assume and say Angus King is lying because he leans towards Democrats and he's an independent. The same Angus King that said it's pointless to fight against Donald Trump during that government shutdown. Let's go ahead and vote to give them more power to continue to destroy people's lives. I just want to give that side note of who Angus King is currently. But also Mike Rounds, he doesn't want to be off of the Republican, good guys list, but he's confused about why it is that Marco Rubio told him one thing and then is now saying something else. So all these guys would have to be lying. Mike Rounds, Angus King, because Marco Rubio, who works for the most corrupt and dishonest administration probably in history, is talking, and he just takes things back and says they're lying. Does that make any sense? Let's ask Marco Rubio more details of what's happening.
So it is in my personal view that we've had probably the most productive and meaningful meeting so far in this entire process since we've been involved in from the beginning. We have a very good work product that was already built on a foundation of input from all the relative parties involved here. And we were able to go through some of those items now point by point, and I think we've made good progress. Our teams have now gone to their rooms as we're working on some of the suggestions that were proffered to us. So we're working through making some changes, some adjustments in the hopes of furthering narrowing the differences and getting closer to something that both Ukraine and obviously the United States are very comfortable with. Obviously, this will ultimately have to be signed off by our presidents, although I feel very comfortable about that happening given the progress we've made. And then obviously there's the Russian side of the equation. But again, we think we have some pretty substantial insights over the last 9 months into some of the things that are really important to them. So I think the takeaway from it is I think this is a very, very meaningful, I would say probably best meeting and day we've had so far in this entire process, going back to when we first came into office in January. But there's
very meaningful. They've had a lot of talks. They're taking everyone into consideration. I'm not sure if he really got a chance to discuss what is it he was talking about. It's what he took back from what he told these senators, what they could share and where this information then came from. So if everything has been so smooth sailing, as I guess now Marco Rubio is trying to say it has been, I'm wondering why the increasingly irritable president of the United States, who has some new stylings going on here, why he's still so brash and angry.
Is this your final offer to Ukraine?
No, not much. No, we'd like to get to peace. It should have happened a long time ago. The Ukraine war with Russia should have never happened. If I were president, it never would have happened. We're trying to get it ended. One way or the other, we have to get it ended. So well, then he can continue. Then he can continue to fight his little heart out.
Does that sound like a guy who gives a damn about peace? Does that sound like a guy who's actually trying to be in the middle of this whole thing and broker a peace deal? Does that sound like a guy who's going to talk to the person in the country who is the aggressor in this entire conflict, that he has to start every time by saying, if I was in office, this never would have happened. Nobody cares anymore about that line. Bro, we know that's your standard line every time you talk about Russia, Ukraine. If I was in office, that wouldn't have happened. But now you're in office and things got worse. Now you're in office and we're seeing that you're blatantly and explicitly working for the guy that you said you had such a great relationship with. I feel like when you say you have a great relationship with some people who are or objectively really bad guys who invade countries and say, here, give me some land because I invaded, who, by the way, that stance was piggybacked by you and the Secretary of War. I feel like you guys are all on the same page. So the whole thing about fighting his little heart out, being Zelensky in Ukraine, that means he doesn't really give a damn. That means what he's more interested in is carrying water for Vladimir Putin. So Tommy Pigott, who's the State Department's principal deputy spokesperson, was responding to that whole thing when someone was reporting about Angus King talking about this plan being put forward and it's a wish list for Russians. He responded on Twitter and said, this is blatantly false. As Secretary Rubio and the entire administration has consistently maintained this plan was authored by the United States with input from both the Russians and the Ukrainians. I'd like to refer you back, and maybe I need like a standard, like a reference back to what we should all think every time this administration says anything that's questionable, which is like 99%. They're liars. So why should we listen to the principal deputy spokesperson for the State Department say that Rubio and the whole administration has consistently maintained that this is authored by the United States when it's pretty obvious that they lie about everything? That is, especially when smart people look into what it is that this looked like and discovered something else that flies in the face of that latest lie. Is from the New Republic. The U.S. peace plan presented to Ukraine appears to have been translated from Russian. The syntax of certain phrases are more common in the Russian language, such as the third point of the 28-point plan. Here's a quote. It is expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries and NATO will not expand further. I'm not sure if the way that neighboring was spelled, which is also isn't very American style English, was a part of it either. But here's more details about this translation, rough translation. Here's a quote from that whole line. It is expected is not commonly used in English, but it is common in Russian and appears to come from the phrase, which I'm not going to understand or even mention, according to the Guardian's Luke Harding. Other words that appear to be translated from Russian include ambiguities and to enshrine. More Russian words there pointed out in this New Republic article. So last little bit on this translation that I've seen from multiple sources, not just New Republic, but I feel like theirs broke it down pretty well. It is no accident either. The plan was hammered out by President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Kirill Dmitriev, an advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin, after the two met last month in Miami. While Secretary of State Marco Rubio was also involved, no Ukrainian or European officials were, which is pretty evident by its contents. Pause for a second here. Marco Rubio just said that this is all put together by input between Russian sides and also Ukrainian sides. I wonder if someone asked him, you were there, Marco, and so was Steve Witkoff and also the President Vladimir Putin's advisor. But there was no Ukrainian or European officials there at all. How was it possible that they had their input if they weren't even there for this whole thing that you said you were involved in and that you later took back was all written and given to you by some other person? It doesn't make any sense. Back to the rest of this piece. For example, under the proposal, Ukraine would cede Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk to Russia and would be banned from joining NATO. Russia would get readmitted to the G8. Ukraine would also reduce the size of its military by hundreds of thousands, and no NATO troops could be stationed in the country. Sanctions against Russia would also be lifted, but would snap back if Russia invades Ukraine again. Those sanctions would get snapped back by the guy who never even acknowledged that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in the first place. Why would we trust that either? So here's a couple Republicans that are responding to it on top of the confusion going around this, because if you keep signing on to things like this and you've had this whole entire professional political history of being against the things that Vladimir Putin has always done and continues to do, you might start looking like, Donald Trump or something. Here's Don Bacon responding to Tommy Pigott talking about how blatantly false this whole thing is. He says, some people better get fired on Monday. That's today. for the gross buffoonery we just witnessed over the last 4 days. This hurt our country and undermined our alliances and encouraged our adversaries. That's Don Bacon. I can't remember if Don Bacon is retiring. I would look it up again, but it wouldn't surprise me. One of these guys is retiring. I can't remember which one. But Don Bacon has been one of these few Republicans that this has been his line in the sand, has been on Donald Trump's complete capitulation to Vladimir Putin. I don't know if he's got some guts built up because of his, I don't know, again, this is just a tick in my head. I felt like he's leaving, but maybe he's not. But either way, there's some truth then coming from a Republican around this. A little bit more. I think this was hinted at a little bit in the back and forth, but here's some more stunning developments, at least according to Midas Touch, is what they said. But they said senators confirmed that the Trump administration's 28-point peace plan for Ukraine wasn't a U.S. plan at all. Of course it was, right? So per PBS's Nick Schifrin, it was delivered to Trump, to his envoy, Steve Witkoff, by someone representing Russia. Trump and the administration pushed it. They pressured Zelensky to accept the terms, and then the allies also condemned it. And now we, of course, know what's happening with Rubio on this whole thing. Hand delivered, just given to Steve Witkoff. Why would Steve Witkoff, who was the envoy, special envoy to meet with Vladimir Putin's people to end this whole thing months ago, at the beginning of the 24-hour, one-day situation that Donald Trump promised he would end this conflict, why was it that Steve Witkoff would just accept something from some Russian representative and then pass it off and translate it roughly into English and say that it was our plan? That is while Marco Rubio told fellow Republicans in the Senate that, you know, it is a Russian plan. But that is before he switched back and said that it's his. Oh, my God. Here's Steve Witkoff answering my question as to why he'd be a lemming and do such a thing. It's from a couple months ago.
What did you think of him? I liked him. Yep. I thought he was straight up with me. Of course, by the way, I've said that. And you can imagine, by the way, I say that, I get pilloried. Oh my gosh. You're actually saying
called communication, which many people would say, you know, I shouldn't have had because Putin is a bad guy. I don't regard Putin as a bad guy. That is a complicated situation, that war, and all the ingredients that led up to it. It's, you know, it's never just one person, right? So I think we're gonna figure it out.
That's why, because Steve Witkoff will defend Vladimir Putin and say he's a great guy. Anybody who gets mad at me for saying he's a great guy and understand everything he's done for, I don't know, over 20 years, wouldn't understand, but he's a great guy. I just accept things from him. Here's another indication, just the last indication. This is Steve Witkoff greeting Vladimir Putin. Look at the reverence he's got for him, hand over heart and all. It's tough when you're the representative of a guy who does anything Vladimir Putin wants. And so you're the secondhand fealty minion guy that bows down and has to negotiate something. I'm sorry, accept whatever it is that they tell you to accept, or else whatever it is that happened in that meeting in Alaska that they came out of, and multiple reporters said that the Trump envoy or the Trump group of negotiators came out wide-eyed and looking like eyes like startled of what is that they heard from these guys. I feel like there's too many things going on for us to continue to keep down one road of all of the disaster that this administration is unleashing on the world, just through sheer incompetence and corruption, and apparently some kind of blackmail material. I don't know what it is. Who knows? Who knows? I do know they have Vladimir Putin's interests at heart. So for those of you guys that showed up, we're going to shift on to this next story here as I've jumped in. Man, 24 minutes on that. That's a shame. That's crazy. Let's move on to the other news of the weekend that shook some people to their core, had people very worried, have some folks crying. Man, Marge, why? Why, Marge? Marjorie Taylor Greene, as you guys all know, decided to resign from Congress.
When common American people Realize and understand that the political industrial complex of both parties is ripping this country apart, that not one elected leader like me is able to stop Washington's machine from gradually destroying our country. And instead, the reality is that they, common Americans, the people, possess the real power over Washington. Then I'll be here by their side to rebuild it. Until then, I'm going back to the people that I love, to live my life to the fullest, as I always have, and I look forward to a new path ahead. I'll be resigning from office, with my last day being January 5th, 2026, and I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future.
That's correct. Marjorie Taylor Greene has decided to resign from Congress. I mean, effectively at the beginning of January. We'll get to the significance of the date that she's decided to go ahead and resign. But she had a whole almost 10 and a half, maybe even longer than that, minute discussion about who she is, where she's coming from, and why she's resigning. That was on the back end of the whole thing. I'm gonna give you a couple moments from what is that she explained, because I feel like people were talking about the resignation part and not really going to the way that she tried to sell herself throughout this entire thing. It was kind of all over the place, but it was a calculated kind of all over the place. The way that she was describing herself and the things that she's done, but also the reasons why she's leaving. Here's more from her in this whole thing.
I've worked hard to bring taxpayer dollars back home to help district needs. I impeached Biden's Secretary of Homeland after watching my constituents die as he facilitated dangerous open border invasion into America. And I led the effort to defund hard left politically biased NPR and PBS and the corrupt USAID, and I did that as chair of the DOJ subcommittee. I have fought harder than almost any other elected Republican to elect Donald Trump and Republicans to power. I traveled the country for years. I spent millions of my own money. I missed precious time with my family that I can never get back. And I showed up in places like outside the New York courthouse in Collect Pond Park against a raging leftist mob as Trump faced Democrat lawfare. Meanwhile, most of the establishment Republicans who secretly hate him and who stabbed him in the back and never defended him against anything have all been welcomed in right after the election. And I will never forget the day I had to leave my mother's side as my father had brain surgery to remove cancerous tumors in order to fly to Washington, D.C. to defend President Trump and vote no against the Democrats' second impeachment in 2021. My poor father and my poor mother, it was way too much for all of us.
Well, that's the section where she decides to talk about her undying loyalty to Donald Trump, her complete and utter fealty to it. Her, by the way, I'm glad she's saying it so that folks who have been, clear-eyed about who she continues to be won't have to say it and then get called someone with Trump derangement syndrome. She said she's still proud of her stance against PBS and her stance on the DOJ committee and getting rid of USAID, that organization that actually helps people in need. And then now so many people have died because of the removal of those funds and that assistance. She's proud of that stuff. This huge Democrat super lib that Fox News is calling her because of the last few weeks of her saying two things that make some sense. Instead, she's touting all of her super conservative, super Donald Trump gravitas, all of her credentials about how much of a piece of shit she still is. Yo, I didn't say it. She said it. She's pointing out all this stuff about her, but she does want to give you guys these nuggets of how she disagreed at other points because she's so courageous.
Through it all, I never changed or went back on my campaign promises and only disagreed in a few areas, like my stance against H-1Bs replacing American jobs, AI state moratoriums, debt for life 50-year mortgage scams, standing strongly against all involvement in foreign wars, and demanding the release of the Epstein files. Other than that, my voting record has been solidly with my party and the president. Loyalty should be a two-way street, and we should be able to vote our conscience and represent our district's interests because our job title is literally representative. America first should mean America first and only Americans first, with no other foreign country ever being attached to America first in our halls of government. Standing up for American women who were raped at 14 years old, trafficked and used by rich, powerful men should not result in me being called a traitor and threatened by the President of the United States, whom I fought for. However, while yes, hurtful, my heart remains filled with joy, my life is filled with happiness, and my true convictions remain unchanged, because my self-worth is not defined by a man, but instead by God, who created everything in existence.
Well, I think she is touching on one of the things that's forcing her out. I'm sorry, that's making her choose to suddenly resign out of nowhere. Donald Trump is threatening her. We already saw it. I mean, we saw her respond to it and talk about how she's being threatened and talk about the death threats that she's received since. Talk about how rabid that it's gotten. But still, as to go back to her previous little clip that I played there, it's coming from all that, but the left is so much worse. Can't believe it. They always came after me. It's I always fought against all of these horrible things about the left, because they're trying to destroy us. That is until the guy that I've supported that she full-throatedly just said she did all this stuff for and still stands the same way for him, came for her. Crazy how that works. But this is how she's going to try and twist it to the point of having some strength behind this resignation and running from the fact that Donald Trump, to whatever degree, threatened the hell out of her.
I have too much self-respect and dignity. I love my family way too much, and I do not want my sweet district to have to endure a hurtful and hateful primary against me by the president that we all fought for, only to fight and win my election while Republicans will likely lose the midterms, and in turn be expected to defend the president against impeachment after he hatefully dumped tens of millions of dollars against me and tried to destroy me. It's all so absurd and completely unserious. I refuse to be a battered wife, hoping it all goes away and gets better. If I am cast aside by the president and the MAGA political machine and replaced by neocons, big pharma, big tech, military-industrial war complex, foreign leaders, and the elite donor class that can never, ever relate to real Americans, then many common Americans have been cast aside and replaced as well.
A quick translation. I'm worried I'm going to lose the next race. If I lose the next race, I don't have much of a leg to stand on to then go and project myself to those next levels of government that I'm looking to get to, say maybe even governor of Georgia. And some people are speculating she's going to run for president. I'm not sure if she really thinks she can do that, but maybe she has these thoughts of grand jumps and bounces to the next levels. But in order to do that, you can't finish your lower session term, especially in something like Congress, where you get beat. And then so many people dislike you, not only from the left, but also from the right, because of the last couple of weeks of your opposition to Donald Trump based off of the Epstein file situation, which is obviously a cover up for this nasty, destructive things and people that he's continuing to try and keep hidden. So because of these two principles, also Middle East and Gaza and standing against Israel's complete and utter genocide of these people, those things have her against so many people in MAGA now. And I'm glad there's still way too many people that are clear-headed that are like, man, F Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's kind of in no man's land. So she's thinking she can take off, rehabilitate her career, but then also avoid all those death threats. So this is her finishing up her middle ground approach. She's above it all. She's above politics. She's sick of all of this. She's sick of being a Marjorie Taylor Greene. So Marjorie Taylor Greene never acknowledges, though, that she's a Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here's the last bit of what she had to say.
I have never valued power, titles, or attention, in spite of all the wrong assumptions about me. I do not cling to those things because they are meaningless and empty traps that hold too many people in Washington. I believe in term limits and do not think Congress should be a lifelong career or an assisted living facility. My only goal and desire has ever been to hold the Republican Party accountable for the promises it makes to the American people and put America first. And I have fought against Democrats' damaging policies like the Green New Deal, wide open, deadly, unsafe border policies, and the trans agenda on children and against women. With that has brought years of nonstop, never-ending personal attacks, death threats, lawfare, ridiculous slander and lies about me that most people could never withstand even for a single day. It has been unfair and wrong, not only to me, but especially to my family. But it's been wrong to my district as well.
You see that? It's positioning herself to be this above all that I mentioned, above all politician. Doesn't want to hurt her sweet constituents. I love them too much. I don't want to see them vote against me. And then I can no longer say that my constituents, I love them and they love me back, because the voting will show that they don't. If that would happen, I don't even know. I can't even assume that she would lose. I can't see someone like her then losing in a place like that, but maybe things would be destroyed enough and turned around that it actually could. But she wants to make sure that she steps aside, gets away from the whole back and forth and toxicity, but still is going to talk about the left being so destructive, as she talks about people transing kids and all this stuff. She's still a hateful piece of shit. Let's keep it real. But she doesn't want you to keep seeing that. She's repositioning herself. And Donald Trump's response to this whole thing, I think, kind of tells us another layer to this whole story. He was pissed. Remember? Posted a couple things. Led to death threats towards her, like he knew it would, because he likes to wield that kind of power over his dummies, randomly spiraling around in the country. So Rachel Scott of ABC News posted about what she had to say to him about this. She said, just spoke with Trump on the phone. He said Marjorie Taylor Greene resigning is, quote, great news from the country. I don't know. She quoted it to make sure that it wasn't her saying it, it was him saying it like that. Continuing, she says, I think it's great news for the country. It's great, the president said. I asked if she gave him any heads up. Nah, it doesn't matter. You know, but I think it's great. I think she should be happy, he said. What? So the lady you just said has turned on MAGA. You don't understand how she's MAGA, and you don't understand why she's flipped and done all this stuff. And then you've got Fox News saying that she's a total Democrat and all this stuff. But it's just this quick. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I just think that she should be happy. She just be happy. I mean, whatever. It's fine. Come on, bro. There's more to it, and there's definitely more to the conversations around it. Last bit of the conversation that Rachel Scott had with him, though. She says, when I asked the president about the rift between the two of them, the president said, only between me and her, not her and me. He said, as of now, he has no plans to speak to her and wishes her well. he also wished Ghislaine Maxwell well, but I feel like there's different kinds of energy behind this random and empty wish her well. I guess he's not sure what her next plans are, as everyone else has to speculate as well too. But I get the feeling that Marjorie Taylor Greene is not going to just go home and go back to doing CrossFit in her garage and then not talking to anyone anymore and not trying to position herself in any other kind of way. But I do wonder, think about this. What happens with her stance and her push to release Epstein files? What happens to the ongoing potential release of information, to continue cover up of information that this Trump administration and this DOJ and the FBI are going to continue to do? Where's this fighter who said she's going to go and stand on the floor of Congress and read off the names of the culprits? Why is she running now? Does she not care about this anymore? Because she definitely brought up the assault of these children in one of these hugest child sex rings ever. And now is she running from it? Does she assume it's going to be all over before January? I'm wondering why no one's asking, do you not care anymore? Do we assume it's going to be over by Christmas or something? There's other folks who are digging into this ridiculousness as well too. One of them is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She said she's carefully timing her departure just 1 to 2 days after her pension kicks in and after making millions of dollars insider trading stocks for weapons manufacturers and others while in office. She said this on an Instagram story. Here's more from AOC. She's saying a lot, but her actions have not backed up her rhetoric. For all her talk, she's still voting with them to gut healthcare and advance self-dealing corruption schemes. Couldn't have said it better. It's kind of what we're looking at right in front of us. 1 to 2 days after her pension kicks in, she's going to get her money. Lifelong pension, I believe, is what it is for members of Congress after that amount of time. But also just to continue to have this positioning here and make herself look good. And then having us forget about all that corrupt shit that she's been doing and hateful rhetoric that she's been pushing, because she's above it all now. But it's those threats. Maybe someone else who deals with threats at the Twitter fingers of Donald Trump can compare the two.
Shocking announcement from Congresswoman Green. What went through your mind when you first heard she was going to resign on January 5th?
You know what? Honestly, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You're on the other side of the president for 1 week and you can't take the heat. Imagine what it is to sit in my shoes, to not only be on the opposite side of him, but to have people like her who are constantly fanning the flames of hate. And imagine what those threats look like when you literally are someone like me. But at the end of the day, I know that I serve the people of Texas 30. And so my job isn't to be there and necessarily do whatever is going to make the president not be on my back, but instead is to focus on making sure that I can push forward with policies that are positive for Texas 30.
Here's the shocking announcement from Congress.
So yes, two of the women that she likes to attack and has had very big public feuds with aren't buying it. And I think their positioning and their stances make a lot of sense. So to wrap this whole thing up, Qasim Rashid over on Threads, I think he summed up Marjorie Taylor Greene's life in politics, which I'm not sure is over, and then also her last few weeks in opposing Donald Trump. And I think it's a good synopsis of what has happened. So he says, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been in Congress since 2020 and is resigning as of January 5th. And I just want to point out one thing. She spent 5 years in Congress attacking the left and never feared for her life or safety to any level that would make her resign. She spent 5 weeks mildly critiquing the MAGA right, and the backlash was so severe she's resigning. 5 years of antagonizing the left and resulted in no action. 5 weeks of criticizing the right resulted in resignation. That says it all. So, of course, he's talking about the rabid nature and bloodthirst of these folks on the right and where they always stand for people that they dislike. And man, once you cross Trump, these MAGA minions come after you. Let me give you a taste of maybe potentially the kinds of threats that she got. I'm going to play this from Representative Jason Crow. He's a Democrat. He was on that video that multiple Democrats, veterans, and folks that worked in intelligence that put out that video to tell active duty members of the service to not obey illegal orders. You know, that also led to death threats to them when Donald Trump lost his mind while sitting on the can tweeting something out. So it's unrelated as the topic to it, but I want to show you the types of things that he posted, the responses he got and the threats that he received. Maybe this is what has Marge running and also trying to protect her political image. Jason Crow played this.
I hope whoever blows your fucking brains out records it, because I would like to watch you stupid cunt. What a fucking loser you are. And Kelly and Slutkin, you cunt. You deserve to die. I hope you all get murdered. I hope you all get fucking throat slashed.
You disgraced America, and I pray you die today, but not before your family does. I pray they die a painful death. Hey, have a blessed day. And if they do die today, rest assured I'll be in church this Sunday, because there is a God. Hurry up and die, you worthless fucking traitor.
Scum. I hope somebody kills you and your whole family. An illegal alien. I hope they kill you and your whole family for you letting them in the country, you scummy bitch. You ain't an American fucker. You're a communist, you Jason Crow, you scummy little bitch.
She probably got stuff like that. But she's MAGA all the way. Okay. Well, we'll see what's to come from Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's all we can do now is speculate and base it off of who she has been before. Maybe she'll ride off into the sunset and we'll never hear of Marjorie Taylor Greene again. She'll go into lobbying work or something like that. And then say the lobbyist is such a great thing now. Who knows? Who gives a damn? Let's move on to this last story, because I like to keep us updated on where we are with tariffs, the economy, how prices are going up, especially as I pointed out, holiday season. Bro, I drove by, which store did I drive by over the weekend? The lot was full, and I was a little surprised. It was Dick's Sporting Goods. That's what it was. And I was like, man, for some reason, my brain was still on. I don't think everybody's going to be shopping like crazy this year, but I think people are shopping like crazy this year. Maybe they're listening to Howard Lutnick, who has so many good things to say with his cheesy ass used car salesman smile. But the main thing he wants to talk about is the victory he's looking to get from, tariffs, and that apparently you're going to get to.
The president is also working on this potential proposal to send out checks of $2,000, dividend checks. And, there's an analyst I spoke with over the weekend who believes that it's unlikely unless we see a second reconciliation package passed in 2026. What's your expectation, Secretary, in terms of a second reconciliation bill or a standalone $2,000 check program to go out?
Look, the tariffs are an American policy. The president wants the American people to understand how great tariffs are for them. And so one of the ways to prove to the American people how great tariffs are is to have them share in a part of 1 year's income from these tariffs. And that's $2,000 a head, as he said, for people who need the money, where he's going to constrain it to people who need the money. And that's exciting. So the president's got that on his desk. I know that's something he wants to achieve, and his legislative team will figure out the best way to do it. But what he's trying to do is make sure people in America understand that tariffs are their policy. It's to make America stronger, and it can also benefit their pocketbook. And that is coming next year from the president.
Yeah, for sure. But the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says that those payments will cost roughly $600 billion each round and increase the deficit by $6 trillion over a decade. The White House preparing, of course, backup plans in case the Supreme Court rules against the president and the emergency powers on tariffs.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. Even Maria Bartiromo wants to point that out. Howard Lutnick again, trying to sell some snake oil in the backseat of that busted used car that he's trying to have you drive off the lot. He wants to make sure that you understand Donald Trump is proving the greatness of tariffs. Let's see if you can come up with this equation. The greatness of tariffs, that you're going to get $2,000 because you're in need of it during this golden era where everyone is so prosperous, so they don't need $2,000, but they still need $2,000. That is because of tariffs, which part of the reasons why you need that $2,000 is because all the money that they say they're raking in from tariffs is coming from your pockets. So let me give you $2,000 back, despite the fact that outside of just also these tariffs, there's other completely destructive policies in this guy's economic agenda that have made things even worse on your life, that everything else is skyrocketed, including healthcare, costs of everything else that has destroyed your life, but you can get $2,000 back, and you're supposed to be happy about it because it's proof that tariffs work. It doesn't make any sense, but it's the same argument that they keep on talking about. Main reason that Lutnick is telling these arguments, these lies, is because the Supreme Court doesn't seem to be leaning in their direction. That's what Donald Trump has been scared and shaking in his boots about. He's like, this is supposed to be my court. So, here's some more sales jobs from this guy.
Sure, what is the backup plan should the Supreme Court rule against you?
Well, we are going to win the case. It's pretty clear. I sat in the Supreme Court. We're going to win the case. But the fact is the president has all sorts of policies and tools throughout. He's got tariff rules of 232 in my department. He's got 301. He's got 338. Tariffs are going to be a part of this administration's national security and national economic protection of the American people. But we are going to win the case. So you can worry about the backup plan, but you're going to watch the Supreme Court back this president, because this president has proven that he can protect America, and IEPA is protecting America. So we are going to win this case. You heard it from me. I feel confident. I sat through the case. We are going to win.
Yeah, you were there.
Does anyone think Howard Lutnick knows what he's talking about? And by the way, his declarations that he's going to win this case and the Supreme Court's going to go their way, I'm not fully thinking that he's crazy about that. They've done other insane things and allowed him to do whatever the hell he wants. So why wouldn't they hear? But it just doesn't make sense with some of these comments and questions and back and forth that we've seen from their deliberations about this. So it's not like it's cut and dry as he's saying, but that's how salesmen do. Even when the thing doesn't work, they keep saying how great and wonderful it is and how it's changed so many different people's lives. So who knows? We'll see where it comes from that. Maybe they're going to get their little victory. but they are a little nervous about it, as you can see from the length of this post from Donald Trump. Again, talking about tariffs. I won't read the whole thing because if you've listened to or read anything that he's mentioned about tariffs, he says it all again here again. But the point is he's repeating it because that's how propagandists work. He says, despite the massive amount of money being made by the United States of America, hundreds of billions of dollars as a result of the tariffs being charged to other countries, the full benefit of the tariffs has not yet been calculated. In that, this is important, by the way, in that many of the buyers of goods and products, in order to avoid paying the tariffs in the short term, stock up by purchasing far more inventory than they can use in order to avoid tariff payments in the short term. That heavy inventory purchase is now, however, wearing thin, and soon tariffs will be paid on everything they apply to without avoidance, and the amounts payable to the U.S. will skyrocket over and above the already historic levels of dollars received. Pause for a second. The same upside down road that he's been preaching to folks here. He's talking about how folks stocked up on products and everything to avoid the next steps of these tariffs skyrocketing on those businesses. That's what's been talked about continuously since that. Any kind of lack of absolute jump in prices, which have been a jump already, but we're talking about exorbitant, exponential jumps in prices, is because of some of the companies, bigger ones, able to do it more, were able to stock up to know how this works, to make sure that they don't have to shoot up their prices to the degree that they're going to have to shoot up their prices. But he thinks it's going to be a good thing. More money will be siphoned from your pockets, which will be proof of how great tariffs are. Because, once that whole thing happens, it'll be great. The good news is nobody's really buying it, especially since, I don't know if you guys remember this, because I played it twice already. There's 3 different instances. Donald Trump saying that he's lowering or getting rid of some of these tariffs on things like bananas and coffee because they're destroying people's lives and these prices are skyrocketing. Scott Bessent saying that they're lowering the price on coffee because it's skyrocketing. And that same sales job asshole, Howard Lutnick, saying it's great. You know what Donald Trump is doing? Donald Trump is lowering the price because he cares about people. And he's using his tariff power to take back his tariff power to then lower prices. So they've already stepped on their entire argument by pointing out that those tariffs have raised costs. And the way to lower those particular costs is by getting rid of those, same tariffs. Hey, here's another ass liquor in this administration that doesn't do anything but support Donald Trump, no matter how bad his ideas are. It's Brooke Rollins. Here, she's talking about that too.
Now, what happened with Brazil with those tariffs coming off is this. We're now just back to where we were in February when Liberation Day was announced, meaning that, for example, on a lot of goods, including beef and others, we're back to the 25% tariff that is congressionally authorized. So when they say we're taking the tariffs off of Brazil, all we're doing is going back to what was there originally, which was 25%. So the president continues, I believe, to move America forward in such a remarkable way. All of these achievements over the last just 10 months, that's kind of amazing. Some days it feels like 10 years, but we've really only been 10 months, and there's so much good left to do.
But the farmers might get...
Now,
you ain't lying. It does feel like 10 years because of the destructive nature of this administration. You see how she just... I want everyone to know we're just pulling back tariffs since before Donald Trump slapped in all these ridiculous tariffs on Liberation Day. It's not that big of a deal. It's just back to what it was before. Yeah, we know that. Why is it they're presenting it that way and saying it was just the way it was before? Yeah, that's the whole point. That's how you lower prices from the things that you raised prices on by slapping those tariffs on. Dumb. I'm sorry. She's not even being dumb in this situation. She thinks anyone that's listening to her is dumb enough to buy this line that she's talking about. But there's other issues. It's not just the bananas and the coffee, as we've been documented well in these past few months. These farmers and these ranchers, all these folks are getting destroyed, specifically soybean farmers. Check out this sales job of how suddenly soybean farmers are going to be doing great.
we're selling a lot more soybeans than we were, though, a couple of months ago when we first started
that was the
talking
big
about
problem. China went from the biggest buyer of soybeans to zero purchases
That's
of
right.
soybeans. That was the biggest issue that happened. That happened on President Trump's watch.
Well, so we have seen a decline from China buying soybeans for years. It is an important point, though, because China just a few years ago was buying about 65% of our soybeans from America. They have pivoted to buying a lot of Brazilian soybeans. And also the president has said, as has Secretary Bessent, that using our soybean farmers for leverage is not okay. So in the last, just a couple of weeks ago, the announcement was that China is back on to buy soybeans, 12 million metric tons this year, 25 million metric tons over the next few years. They've already put in a purchase order. We've already started shipping soybeans their way, almost 1.5 million metric tons. We have every indication they will continue to buy soybeans, sorghum, et cetera. But it goes to the larger effort of President Trump. We can't be so reliant as Americans producing American products on one country, a foreign adversary. So opening up, Japan's going to buy more soybeans. The EU is going to buy more soybeans. There are countries all around the world now that have committed to that, Argentina and others. So next year, I think you'll begin to see a incredible move toward these opening markets and moving more of our American agriculture products out. So
why believe Brooke Rollins when she says next year? Lutnick said next year. Scott Bessent said next year. Donald Trump said next year. Why would anyone believe that soybeans are going to suddenly being bought by all these other countries, EU countries, Japan? China's buying them back. China's made new deals for these types of things. But we're supposed to just believe it. And then I guess she expects no one to ask next year after that doesn't happen. If it doesn't happen, I can't predict the future. Why it's not happening anymore? Because, you know, people would ask that question. They just go, next year, 6 more months. Why don't you guys have a little bit of patience? So I'm about out of here. I got to go to TDR in a second, but I just want to show you guys one more thing. We're talking about all this prosperity and suddenly all this stuff is being bought. The economy's great, but she still has to talk about how they're looking to bail out farmers. Why the hell would you have to bail out farmers? One more time. I just want to keep pushing this weird logic when everything is so great. Everything's so wonderful.
Farmers might get helped eventually. That hasn't happened yet, right? 15 billion, is it in the works? It's okay. So we do tariffs on one hand, that's to try to accomplish one thing, but that hurts. That has unintended consequences maybe with farmers. So we're using this 15 billion for was it a good idea? Was it positive in the end? I guess you can use some of the tariff proceeds maybe for the 15 billion for the farmer?
So a couple of quick points on that. First of all, what the president did with Liberation Day, with enacting all these tariffs back in February, we now have dozens of new trade deals. And within Indonesia, Australia, Japan, EU, England, it's just remarkable. And a lot of these deals, people tried for 20, 25 years to get these deals. Again, under the last administration, we didn't have one new trade deal. We went from a agriculture trade surplus under Trump 1 to a deficit, $50 billion deficit in just agriculture. So think about the effects on our farmers and our ranchers. $50 billion is a significant amount when you're growing corn or soybeans or apples or whatever you're growing. So being able to solve for that, which now we're doing, again, it's incredible.
You don't have to believe it, especially since it doesn't make any sense. Kind of like TDR, you know, probably shouldn't believe me when I say I'm going to be on time. I got to go, you guys. I'll see you in a couple more seconds over at TDR. Happy Monday. I'll say it again in a couple more seconds in case you need to hear it all over again. See you later, Ma.